The gallery fell silent the instant she leaned back, folded her arms, and said it. "You cannot touch me. My father is a senator." Her voice rang out like a challenge across the courtroom, sharp enough to slice through the very air. Even the bailiff stopped moving. Judge Judy did not flinch. She simply picked up a single folder, slim and unremarkable, and opened it. What she uncovered next wiped every trace of that smug expression clean off her face. The smirk lingered long after the echo of her words dissolved. "You cannot touch me." It hung there like expensive perfume, bold, suffocating, and designed to intimidate. The camera drifted slowly across the gallery as the tension built. People shifted in their seats, whispering behind cupped hands, watching Judge Judy to see how she would handle a girl who treated laws like suggestions. Alyssa Harwood sat at the defendant's table with flawless posture. Her chin tilted just enough to remind everyone she was accustomed to being admired, envied, obeyed. Her designer heels crossed with a crisp click, like punctuation after a cutting remark. An air of polished superiority settled across her face, the kind that comes from a lifetime of cushioned falls, the kind that says the world has always moved in her direction, never against it. But Judge Judy did not move. She did not react. She studied Alyssa the way a surgeon examines an X-ray, quietly, precisely, already locating the crack beneath the surface. The courtroom lights burned harshly over the bench, highlighting Judy's composure as though the room itself understood that a shift in power was coming. Maria Torres sat on the opposite side, a smaller presence beside Alyssa's manufactured confidence. Maria gripped a folder so tightly its edges began to buckle. Her fingers shook the way people shake when they have been wronged so deeply that simply occupying the same room as the person who hurt them feels unbearable. Alyssa glanced across at her with a dismissive scoff, as though Maria were an inconvenience rather than a person. She fabricated half of this, she muttered beneath her breath, but loud enough for the cameras to pick up, for Maria to hear, for the gallery to wince. Judy's eyes narrowed, just slightly. "A judge needs no theatrics to command a room, Miss Harwood," Judy said, her tone quiet but laced with steel. "Do you understand where you are right now?" Alyssa smiled, not warmly, strategically. A senator's daughter smile softened by charm and sharpened by entitlement. "Of course I do," she replied. "But I think you should understand who I am." A hush moved through the courtroom like a cold current. Maria dropped her gaze, the humiliation of that dynamic all too familiar. The bailiff turned his head just enough to catch the moment in his peripheral vision, instinctively bracing himself. Judy leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the bench. The overhead lights cast shadows along her robe, lending weight to her silhouette. "I know exactly who you are," she said, voice unwavering. "Today, we will find out who you choose to be." Alyssa's smirk wavered, not enough to reveal fear, but enough for anyone watching closely to catch the first tremor, the kind people get when the ground beneath them begins to give way, even as they pretend not to notice. "The plaintiff alleges serious misconduct," Judy continued, "and you will answer for it." Alyssa rolled her eyes, poised to speak, to dismiss, to minimize, to redirect. But Judy's next word stopped her cold. "Before you do," she said, pressing her fingers once against the bench, "I have a file here containing information you may want to carefully consider before you speak." Alyssa's jaw tightened. Judy raised the slim folder into view, its edges catching the light, truth straining to be released. Alyssa's smirk crumbled just enough to hint at the storm gathering beneath. It returned the moment the folder touched the desk, smaller now, more rigid, but still present, like a mask worn too long. She believed the worst had passed. She had no idea the truth was only just beginning to surface. The air in the courtroom felt warmer, heavier. A low stillness settled over the room as though everyone sensed the growing distance between Alyssa's confidence and reality. She leaned back casually, tossing her hair over her shoulder with a practiced flick. Her expression carried the arrogance of someone who had always believed the rules existed for everyone else. Maria watched quietly from across the aisle, eyes cast downward. Her hands wrapped around her papers as though holding together the last fragments of her dignity. A small tremor moved through her fingers, one she tried to conceal by tucking her hand beneath the folder. She had spent months carrying the weight of her internship's collapse, each memory pressing into her like something she could not set down. Alyssa's voice cut through the stillness. "Maria, really," she said, loud enough for the gallery to absorb every word. "This whole thing is absurd. You never had what it takes for that position anyway." Maria's chest rose with a slow, pained breath. She said nothing. She had learned that arguing with someone who is incapable of being wrong is like trying to outrun your own shadow. But Judy spoke for her. "Miss Harwood," she said, her tone sharp enough to draw every eye. "I do not recall asking for commentary." Alyssa's brows arched with rehearsed innocence. "I was simply being honest," she answered with a light shrug. Judy tilted her head in a way that made the gallery lean in. "Whose honesty?" she asked. "Yours or the kind backed by evidence?" Something flickered behind Alyssa's eyes. There and gone. She turned toward Judy with exaggerated patience, as though tolerating someone beneath her station. With all due respect, stop. Judy raised one hand, the gesture small but absolute. Do not open with all due respect, when everything that follows will be the opposite of respectful. A wave of barely contained laughter rolled through the gallery before silence swallowed it whole. Maria shifted in her seat and for the first time, her eyes found Judy's. There was something in them, not a hunger for revenge, but a need for acknowledgement, for someone to finally confirm that the damage had been real. Judy gave a small, quiet nod, then she turned back to Alyssa. You are accused, Judy said, of using your father's influence to interfere with the plaintiff's internship placement, and of submitting communications that led directly to her removal from consideration. Alyssa scoffed. I did not interfere. I corrected a mistake. They placed her ahead of me when I was clearly the stronger candidate. Judy raised one eyebrow. Is that your final position on the matter? It is the only position, Alyssa replied, crossing her arms. I mean, do we really need to waste time pretending? Her tone carried a soft, venomous amusement, a laugh she never released, a superiority she no longer bothered concealing. Judy sat back, eyes steady, voice calm. Yes, she said. Moodoo. Because today, unlike the world you are accustomed to, we will not be operating on your assumptions. Alyssa opened her mouth, poised to fire off another casual dismissal, but a sudden shift cut her off. Judy slid the sealed folder forward, the sound of paper against wood echoing through the room like the opening note of a confession. Alyssa leaned forward despite herself, smirk flickering. Judy opened the folder slowly. Let us begin with the first document, shall we? The interruption burst from Alyssa's mouth before she could stop it. No, this is absurd. The courtroom reacted as though someone had snapped a wire pulled too tight. For the first time, Alyssa's voice did not glide. It stumbled. The certainty she had carried so effortlessly shattered, thin as glass under sudden pressure. The gallery stiffened, a ripple of surprise moving through the rows as her outburst hung in the air, sharp and poorly timed. Judge Judy did not raise an eyebrow. She simply closed the folder halfway, as though offering Alyssa the space to hear her own mistake ring back at her. Are you finished? Judy asked, her tone almost gentle, dangerously gentle. Alyssa straightened, trying to gather the broken pieces of her composure. I just mean this is being blown out of proportion. There was no interference, no conspiracy. No, whatever she is accusing me of. Maria flinched at the word whatever. Pain moved across her face, small, restrained, but impossible to miss. She pressed the folder against her chest the way someone might press a hand over a bruise that never fully healed. Even her breathing tightened, as though Alyssa's dismissal had torn open wounds she had spent months carefully closing. Judy shifted her gaze briefly to Maria, offering a quiet nod of reassurance before turning back. Let us examine that, she said. You claim there was no interference. The plaintiff claims you caused her internship to be revoked. This folder contains communications directly relevant to those allegations. Alyssa forced a laugh, soft and brittle, carrying more fear than amusement. Those emails are private. They are being stripped of context. Context, Judy replied, is precisely what we are here to establish. The camera moved in on Alyssa's face. Her smile had grown unnatural, lips held too rigid, eyes blinking too rapidly. A visible tremor, subtle but undeniable. She was beginning to fracture. Maria, summoning her courage, finally spoke. I worked 3 part-time jobs to qualify for that internship, she said, her voice low but unwavering. I was the only student in my cohort recommended by both faculty members. When I was suddenly removed from the list, no one would tell me why. I found out months later that someone had emailed the coordinator with specific instructions. Alyssa's jaw tightened. That is not my problem if she could not handle competition. Maria swallowed. I did handle it. I earned it. The words landed with quiet, unexpected force. A slow exhale moved through the gallery. People leaned in, drawn toward the unraveling happening before them. The emotional weight of the room shifted. Maria rose quietly while Alyssa shrank, unintentionally but visibly. Judy pressed a finger against the folder. Miss Harwood, your version of events does not align with what we are about to examine. Alyssa looked away, her confidence slipping by degrees. Smirk fading, posture stiffening, fingers picking at the edge of her blazer sleeve. Bring me the sealed folder, Judy said softly. The clerk stepped forward and placed it on the bench with a faint thud that landed like a heartbeat. Alyssa's eyes widened, not dramatically but enough. The first real crack. The first sign she was not prepared for what was coming. Judy broke the seal, lifted the first page and said, Miss Harwood, would you like to explain this? The seal came apart with a soft tear, quiet but devastating. Alyssa went still, her breath caught somewhere between confidence and collapse. Everyone else in the courtroom leaned forward as though gravity itself had rearranged. The slim folder rested on Judge Judy's bench like a silent threat. It was not thick enough to appear dangerous. But truth rarely needs volume. It needs precision. and whatever lived inside those pages had already drained the color from Alyssa's face. Judy lifted the first sheet slowly, letting the silence settle over the room like a heavy, expectant weight. Alyssa watched the page rise, her eyes widening by degrees she could no longer control, her fingers pressing into each other, knuckles pale with tension. The smirk that had sat so proudly on her lips was gone. Not a trace of it remained. This, Judy began, holding the page between two fingers, is an email chain between your father's aide and the internship coordinator. A low murmur moved through the gallery. Alyssa's shoulders stiffened. I've never seen that, she blurted. Too quickly. Anyone could have written. Judy cut her off with a raised hand. I have not finished. Alyssa's jaw snapped shut. Judy continued, her voice calm but razor-edge. The messages discuss removing the plaintiff's application due to family priorities and placement expectations. The signature at the bottom, a Harwood. A collective inhale swept through the room. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum louder, amplifying the tension. Alyssa's throat moved with a hard swallow. That could be anyone, she whispered, though even she did not sound convinced. Maria stared at the page from across the room. Her eyes glistened not with triumph, but with the ache of finally seeing the truth she had lived through given shape on paper. Her breathing was shallow, the memory of humiliation pressing forward like an unwelcome shadow. She looked down, pressing her fingers to her lips as if to hold her composure in place. Judy set the first page aside and lifted another. This one, she said, is from your student account, same message, same signature, same timestamp. Alyssa's composure fractured in real time. Her shoulders trembled. That is not possible, she insisted, but the strength behind the words gave way at the edges. Judy leaned forward, her eyes locked onto Alyssa with unsettling steadiness. You requested the removal of another student's internship opportunity because you believed you were more deserving of it. Alyssa opened her mouth, then closed it. The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. Maria looked up at Alyssa for the first time, not with anger, but with something softer and far more devastating. Recognition. Recognition of the truth Alyssa had been running from for months. Recognition of how effortlessly one person's entitlement had dismantled another person's future. The gallery sat frozen. The bailiff shifted slightly, eyes narrowed. Even the camera seemed to slow, lingering on the raw undoing spreading across Alyssa's face. Judy lowered the folder to the bench, her voice dropping in volume but gaining in weight. We will work through each communication. But understand this, Miss Harwood. Truth has a way of rising to the surface, even when buried beneath power. Alyssa's breath hitched. Judy tapped the edge of the folder once. Now, would you like to explain this email? Judy lifted the email and began to read. Each word landed like a measured blow, steady, undeniable. By the second sentence, Alyssa's face had already begun to come apart. The applicant, Maria Torres, should be removed immediately. Judy read, her voice calm but cold. Senator Harwood expects Alyssa to be placed in the remaining slot. Do not contact Maria regarding this change. A collective gasp rolled through the room. Alyssa's spine caved inward as though someone had pulled a thread concealed inside her posture. Her hands reached for the table, fingers trembling. The confidence she had walked in with, polished, rehearsed, immaculate, began dissolving like wax beneath a heat she had never anticipated. That is not. I did not write that, she blurted, too quickly, too desperately. Judy set the paper down with slow, deliberate precision. This message was sent from your personal university account. Alyssa's mouth opened. No words came. A faint tremor moved through her lower lip. She looked down at her hands as though surprised to find them shaking. Maria watched the unraveling with a conflicted expression. Relief mixed with grief. Validation sat alongside the memory of everything she had lost. Her eyes glistened, but she did not look triumphant, just exhausted, tired of fighting to prove something she had always known. Judy lifted a second page. This message, she continued, references your father's aide confirming your request. It also states, and I quote, Alyssa insists she cannot lose to her. She will not accept being second. Alyssa closed her eyes. The softness of it was startling, a brief glimpse of the girl beneath the arrogance. The one who had never learned how to fail without hiding behind someone else's authority. That was taken out of context, she whispered. How? Judy asked. Explain to me how a message instructing someone to eliminate a student's application because you wanted the position is misunderstood. I am listening. Alyssa opened her mouth again, her voice barely more than a sound. I did not think they would actually do it. I was frustrated. People say things when they are frustrated. Judy tilted her head slightly. People say things. They do not send formal emails directing staff to sabotage another student's future. A flush crept up Alyssa's neck. Her breathing came fast and shallow. The breathing of someone realizing the ground beneath them was no longer holding. Maria's quiet voice cut through the tension. I lost the internship, she said softly. My professor told me to try again next semester. They said the program went with someone more qualified. She paused. They meant her. Alyssa flinched. Judy's gaze sharpened. Miss Harwood, you orchestrated the removal of a deserving student to claim a position you did not earn. That is not frustration. That is manipulation. Alyssa shook her head instinctively, eyes glassy. I did not mean for it to ruin her. I could not stand losing again. The courtroom absorbed that confession. The first real admission, thin but genuine. Judy leaned forward. What you could not stand, Miss Harwood, was being held accountable. Alyssa's breath faltered. Judy picked up one final page and said, then explain why you also sent this. Alyssa stared at the page in Judy's hand as though it were something living. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. For the first time, the courtroom saw fear. Not the fierce kind, but the kind that comes from truth finally catching up. The paper trembled slightly between Judy's fingers, though not from her hand, from the tension radiating through the room. Every pair of eyes was fixed on Alyssa as she tried to piece together whatever fragments remained of her once flawless composure. Judy cleared her throat and began reading. Remove Maria permanently. She is not on my level. Signed a Harwood. Alyssa's face drained. That is not what I meant, she whispered, though every word sounded like an admission wearing the costume of a denial. People exaggerate when they are upset. I was venting. You cannot take it literally. Judy lowered the page slowly. Miss Harwood, you did not send this to a friend. You sent it to a program coordinator. Her tone sharpened without gaining volume. This is not venting. This is instruction. Alyssa swallowed hard, her throat visibly tightening. She pressed her hands together on the table, squeezing them. I assumed it would not matter. My father, he told me. She stopped, realizing she had already said too much. Judy leaned forward. Finish the sentence. Alyssa's lips pressed shut, trembling. Maria sat across from her, her expression a quiet ache. She took no pleasure in what she was witnessing. She did not revel in the collapse. Her eyes were damp, but she held them steady, as though allowing herself to feel too deeply would pull forward memories she had worked hard to leave behind. Her voice emerged, soft but grounded. When they pulled my application, they told me I lacked professionalism. She paused, her breath unsteady. I spent weeks trying to figure out what I had done wrong. The words landed harder than any accusation. Alyssa flinched, tears gathering but refusing to fall. I did not mean to ruin your life. I just wanted, her voice broke. I just wanted to win something. For once. The gallery stirred, caught off guard. It was the most truthful thing she had said all day. Judy's expression softened, only slightly. Her authority remained, but it was shaped now by understanding rather than edge. Wanting to succeed does not give you the right to destroy someone else. Alyssa bowed her head. Her shoulders shook once. Not a sob, but the beginning of something coming undone. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Can I call my father? Judy's response was immediate. No, he is not on trial, you are. Alyssa squeezed her eyes shut. A tear slipped free despite her effort to hold it back. She had spent years standing behind her father's influence like a shield. But shields become cages when truth arrives. Judy drew a breath and set the papers aside. Miss Harwood, continuing to be dishonest will only deepen the consequences. You need to understand that. Alyssa nodded slowly, barely moving. I do not want to lie anymore, she murmured, sounding young, small, and completely unprepared for her own vulnerability. Judy studied her with a blend of firmness and quiet empathy. Then tell the truth. Alyssa opened her mouth. No words came. She inhaled unevenly. I want my father here, she repeated. Judy's voice cut through the stillness. No, Alyssa, today, you stand alone. Alyssa's plea lingered in the air as the silence shifted. It was no longer the silence of arrogance collapsing. It was the silence of someone realizing the shield they had always relied on was never built for their protection. Alyssa straightened slowly, wiping a tear with the back of her hand, careful not to smear the expensive makeup she had applied that morning with complete certainty she would not need to cry. Her breathing was uneven, out of sync with the stillness of the room. The defendant who had walked in sitting tall now seemed to be shrinking into her chair, as though the seat itself was pulling her under. Judge Judy folded her hands, her gaze unwavering. I understand you believe your father's presence would alter the weight of this, she said evenly. But this is not a political arena. This is a courtroom. A faint ripple of murmurs moved through the gallery. The shift in tone was unmistakable. Judy had drawn a line, and Alyssa was standing directly on it. Alyssa wiped her nose delicately, as if trying to salvage whatever dignity still remained. You do not understand, she muttered. My father always handles things. That is how it works. Judy tilted her head, studying the fragile honesty behind those words. That may be how your world operates, she said. But it is not how justice operates. Not here. Alyssa's eyes flickered. Panic, confusion, the faint unraveling of someone who had spent her entire life sheltered by influence, protected from consequence by a man who wielded power like armor. Maria watched with complicated emotion. She had expected deception, perhaps cruelty. She had not expected to see a young woman coming apart beneath the weight of a life built on expectations she had never actually chosen for herself. Still, the pain Maria carried was real. The tremor in her hands, the memory of unanswered emails, the opportunities that simply vanished. I was not trying to ruin her life, Alyssa whispered suddenly, her eyes finding Maria. I thought, her voice fractured. I thought I had to be perfect. My father always said that being second meant being nothing. The words hit the courtroom like something blunt and undeniable. Heavy human. Maria's eyes softened, just slightly. Not forgiveness, just recognition of the fear that had driven the harm. Judy leaned forward. So you believed your father's influence gave you the right to rewrite someone else's future? Alyssa nodded. A tiny. It always has, she admitted. Doors open for me. People listen. They do whatever he wants. Judy's voice sharpened. And you believe that extended to me? Alyssa's gaze fell to the table, shame washing across her face like a slow, unavoidable tide. I hoped so. A beat of silence. A heavy one. Judy exhaled through her nose. A long, controlled breath that carried both disappointment and resolve. You will not be shielded here. Not by your father, not by his title, and not by your last name. The truth stands on its own. Alyssa blinked, overwhelmed. Judy nodded toward the clerk. Bring me the second document. The clerk stepped forward, placing another sheet on the bench. Alyssa's eyes widened, not in surprise but in recognition. She knew what was coming. The truth she had buried beneath months of denial was about to resurface. Judy lifted the page slowly. Alyssa's face drained as though the words were already playing in her mind. This, Judy said, is the second part of your involvement, and it is worse than the first. The lights dimmed slightly as the clerk rolled in the monitor. Alyssa's breath stalled. Her eyes locked onto the screen as though it were counting down to her own destruction. Judy nodded once. The clerk pressed play. A low hum filled the courtroom speakers before the footage appeared. A crowded living room, soft music, the unsteady image of a phone camera, a college party. Dim lights, half-finished drinks scattered across a table, laughter bouncing carelessly off the walls. Alyssa stood at the center of the frame, composed, confident, surrounded by students who circled her like planets drawn to a star they could never quite reach. Her smile in the video was different from the one she had worn in court, looser, unguarded. The smile of someone who genuinely believed she would never face consequences. She lifted her glass, laughter spilling out bright and sharp. Maria Torres. Alyssa scoffed on screen. She actually thought she had a chance. My dad handled it, obviously. The room in the video erupted with easy laughter. The kind that stings more than open cruelty. A gasp swept through the real courtroom. Alyssa's hand flew to her mouth as if she could physically force the words back. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes. The beginning of a fall she could no longer slow. On the screen, she kept going. I told them to pull her application. Gone. She should be thanking me. She never belonged in that room. Another wave of laughter followed, effortless and cutting. Maria turned away from the screen, her shoulders folding inward as the memory cut deeper. Hearing the truth stated aloud was one thing. Watching her own humiliation turned into entertainment at a party was something else entirely. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, breathing through the ache. Judy watched Alyssa, not the video. She had no need to watch the footage. She was studying the reaction, the collapsing posture, the unsteady breath, the unraveling of someone who had spent years standing on borrowed authority. When the video ended, the room sat in stunned stillness. Even the cameras stopped moving, as though the silence was too significant to interrupt. Alyssa's voice emerged as a tremor, fragile, unfamiliar. I did not know anyone recorded that, she whispered. Judy responded with quiet, steel-edged clarity. You did not know someone would hold you accountable. That is a different thing entirely. Alyssa covered her face, fingers curled as though trying to hide from the person she had been on that screen. Her breath came in rapid, uneven bursts, the kind that reveal panic, not entitlement. Maria wiped her eyes quietly, her voice strained when she finally spoke. That was my future, a joke at a party, a punchline. Her pain hung in the air, raw and undeniable. Judy turned back to Alyssa. That footage reveals intention, arrogance, and a clear awareness of wrongdoing. It also exposes your belief that power makes cruelty acceptable. Alyssa shook her head, tears slipping free despite every effort to contain them. I am not that person anymore, she whispered, though she sounded uncertain whether she believed it herself. Judy leaned forward. Perhaps, but we judge actions here, Miss Harwood, not excuses. The room held its breath. Judy pressed pause on the final frame. Alyssa mid-laugh, frozen in the arrogance she could no longer escape. Untouchable, Judy said quietly. Let us test that. The paused image glowed on the screen. But the girl sitting in the courtroom bore no resemblance to the one captured in that moment. Her collapse began with a single broken inhale. A soft tremor moved through her shoulders. She tried to conceal it by adjusting her blazer, but the movement was too frantic, too unsteady. The courtroom watched, not with cruelty, but with the hushed stillness that follows a moment of genuine moral weight. The truth had arrived, and its gravity was written plainly across her face. Judy folded her hands slowly, allowing the silence to settle. "Miss Harwood," she said, "I am going to ask you one question. Answer it honestly." Alyssa nodded, though her expression was anything but steady. "What?" Judy asked. "Are you truly afraid of right now?" The question cut deeper than any accusation. Alyssa opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her lips trembled. Her eyes grew glassy, the way a mirror fogs before it cracks. She swallowed, her voice fragile. "I do not know what happens to me now." Her own honesty seemed to catch her off guard. Maria watched her carefully, a mixture of empathy and aching tightening her expression. She had come here seeking truth, not to witness someone come undone. Yet the unraveling felt like a long overdue shift in balance. Consequence finally catching up to entitlement. Judy leaned back. "That fear you feel. Maria carried it for months." Maria's breath hitched. Alyssa looked down, unable to meet her eyes. "I did not think it mattered," Alyssa whispered. "I thought she would be fine. People like her always recover." Maria lifted her head slowly, eyes burning with restrained memory. "People like me," she repeated, the words unsteady. "Do you know what it felt like receiving that rejection? Do you know what it felt like watching everyone move forward while I stayed behind?" Alyssa's breath stuttered. "I am sorry," she murmured, but the apology was thin, fragile, unfinished. Maria pressed on, her voice fracturing in places but pushing through regardless. "I worked for that opportunity. I earned it. And you took it because you were afraid of losing." Alyssa flinched hard. The truth landed like something physical. Judy let the moment breathe long enough for the weight of Maria's words to settle. "Miss Harwood," she said quietly, "fear does not justify cruelty." Alyssa wiped at her face with a trembling hand. "I do not know why I did it," she whispered. "I panicked. I knew she would outperform me. I knew I would disappoint my father again." There it was. The first genuine fracture in the armor she had worn her entire life. Her voice grew smaller. "I did not think they would actually remove her. I thought the world worked the way he taught me." Judy studied her carefully. "And how did he teach you, Alyssa?" "A beat, a painful one. That if you are not first, you are nothing," she whispered. The gallery exhaled collectively, not out of sympathy, but recognition. It explained the arrogance, the desperation, the mask. But explanation is not absolution. Judy pressed a finger once against the bench. "This is your moment," she said. "To stop hiding behind your father and stand inside the truth." Alyssa nodded, tears falling freely now. "I want to," she said, her voice unsteady. I do not know how." Judy leaned forward, eyes steady. "Then answer this. Do you regret what you did? Or do you regret being caught?" Alyssa did not answer immediately. Her silence stretched across the room, trembling at its edges. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded like it belonged to someone much younger. I regret both," she whispered. The admission hung in the air, suspended between honesty and self-preservation. Her fingers knotted together on the table, twisting as though she was holding herself from falling apart entirely. The courtroom watched with a strange, quiet tension, not vindictive, not forgiving, but waiting to see who she would become once the mask was gone. Judge Judy studied her, gaze steady but not unkind. "That is not a real answer," she said. "Try again." Alyssa inhaled sharply. Her breath shuddered. "I was afraid," she said. "Not of Maria. Not even of losing the internship." She paused, her voice cracking. "I was afraid of going home." Maria's eyes lifted, confusion softening her expression. Alyssa looked down, shoulders folding inward. "My father does not tolerate failure," she continued. "Every mistake I made growing up, he would remind me of it for months. Sometimes years," he said. "Harwoods are leaders. Harwoods do not lose." Judy's expression shifted, not into sympathy, but into recognition. An acknowledgement of the pressure that had quietly shaped every one of Alyssa's choices. Alyssa swallowed hard. "When I found out Maria was ranked above me for the internship, I panicked. I could already hear his voice. I could already feel the disappointment. I thought if I used his name just once, it would fix everything." She wiped her cheek with a shaking hand. "But then the coordinator actually did it. He removed Maria and I felt relieved." The shame in her voice was unmistakable. "And then I hated myself for feeling relieved." Maria sat very still. Her breathing slowed as she absorbed the confession she had never expected. Not an excuse, but the origin of the cruelty that had taken her future from her. "I told myself it was harmless," Alyssa continued, "that she would get another opportunity, that I needed the win more." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "But the truth is I was jealous. She worked harder than I did. She deserved it more than I did, and I hated that." The gallery shifted. A quiet wave of realization moved through the room. Alyssa had not simply been entitled, she had been terrified. Trying to outrun the shadow of a man who had taught her that worth only came from winning. Judy leaned back, tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm on the bench. You harmed someone because you were afraid of disappointing a man who should have been teaching you integrity, not image. Alyssa nodded weakly. I know. She whispered. I know that now. Maria's voice broke the silence, soft but grounded. You did not have to destroy me to save yourself. Alyssa looked at her, really looked at her, and something fragile inside finally gave way. I am sorry, she murmured. And for the first time, it sounded genuine, not rehearsed, not calculated. Real. Judy let a long silence follow. Fear, she said, is not an excuse, but it does reveal the truth you have been running from. Alyssa closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks, quiet, unguarded, human. Judy's voice dropped. Then let us peel back the final layer, Miss Harwood. Because this was never really about Maria, was it? Alyssa's breath caught. The question struck harder than anything that had come before it. For a moment, she looked like someone standing at the edge of a confession she had spent her entire life avoiding. The courtroom went completely still. Even the hum of the overhead lights seemed to soften as Alyssa's gaze fell to her trembling hands. Her fingers tightened, then loosened, then tightened again. A rhythm of internal struggle. She tried to speak, but the words slipped back down her throat as though afraid to be released. Judy waited. She recognized this silence. It was the kind that arrives just before truth breaks through. Finally, Alyssa exhaled a shuddering breath. No, she whispered. It was not about Maria. Maria tensed, confusion moving across her face. The gallery leaned forward. The emotional weight of the room shifting, drawing everyone into the confession like a current. Alyssa's voice thinned. I did not go after her because I hated her. I did it because she reminded me of everything I was never allowed to be. Judy's eyes narrowed, listening beneath the words. Alyssa pressed a palm to her forehead, tears smearing the last of her mascara. Maria worked hard. She studied. She earned every opportunity she had. She did not need a name to walk into a room and be taken seriously. She swallowed, her voice fracturing. I envied that. I envied her freedom. Maria blinked, the weight of those words landing somewhere unexpected. Alyssa continued, the dam finally giving way. I have spent my entire life performing confidence, performing capability, pretending I deserve everything handed to me, because my father told me I did. The confession spilled like something that had been locked away too long. But I do not know who I am without him telling me. Her shoulders trembled. When I saw Maria ranked higher, I panicked. Not because I believed she had taken something from me, but because I knew she had not. She beat me honestly. And I had no idea how to face that. Judy's gaze softened. Not into forgiveness, but into recognition of the person beneath the entitlement. Alyssa wiped her tears with shaking fingers. I did not want to ruin her. I wanted to be her. Someone who earned things. Someone who did not need power just to matter. Her voice fell to a whisper. But I did not know how to be that person. So I tried to tear her down instead. Maria inhaled sharply, the confession cutting through her. Painful but layered with a complexity she had not anticipated. Alyssa turned toward her slowly, eyes red, voice unsteady. I am so sorry, Maria. Not because I was caught. Not because this is humiliating. I am sorry because I took something from you that I could never have earned on my own. A deeper silence settled over the room. It was no longer the silence of tension. It was the silence of truth finally spoken, raw, jagged, and impossible to take back. Judy leaned forward, elbows on the bench, voice low, and waited. Miss Harwood, she said, that is the first honest thing you have told me today. Alyssa nodded weakly. I do not want to lie anymore, she said. I do not want to be who he made me anymore. Her voice broke entirely. I do not even know who I am without the pretending. Judy folded her hands, her tone shifting into something heavier. Then this, she said, is where the consequences begin, not as punishment, as truth. Alyssa's confession still hung in the air like smoke, dense, revealing, impossible to move through. Maria sat frozen. Judy leaned back slowly as though absorbing the emotional wreckage scattered across the room. The unraveling of Alyssa Harwood, the carefully constructed daughter of a powerful man, settled into the courtroom with a strange, aching stillness. Not satisfaction, not vindication. Something softer and considerably heavier. The recognition that truth changes people, but almost never gently. Alyssa wiped her face with the sleeve of her blazer, trying to steady herself, but her hands were trembling too badly. Mascara tracked down her cheeks in thin dark lines, as though her composure was dissolving not just emotionally but visibly. She pressed her palms flat against the table, anchoring herself before her voice could give out again. Judge Judy regarded her with a steadiness that felt less like judgment and more like examination, as though she was looking not at the offense, but at the human cost buried beneath it. Miss Harwood, Judy said quietly, do you understand the full weight of what you did? Alyssa barely nodded. Yes, she whispered. I think, for the first time, I actually do. Judy turned to Maria. And you, Miss Torres, you deserve the opportunity to speak to that weight. Maria inhaled slowly. the breath of someone preparing to reopen a wound she believed she had already survived. She set her folder down carefully, its edges soft from the hours she had held it. When I lost the internship, Maria began, her voice thin but unwavering, I believed it was my fault. Alyssa's head rose, her eyes widening with quiet pain. I thought I was not good enough, Maria continued. I thought I had failed. I stopped applying for opportunities for months. I could not sleep. I stopped trusting myself. Her voice wavered. I almost dropped out. Alyssa's breath caught, a small, sharp sound she could not suppress. And the hardest part, Maria said, was that no one would tell me why. I kept telling myself that if I had just worked harder, maybe it would not have happened. The gallery shifted. Several people lowered their eyes, feeling the emotional weight settle heavily in the space between the two young women. Alyssa began crying again, but this time it was silent. Her shoulders shook with grief, not panic. She murmured, I did not know it went that far. Judy raised a hand gently, not to comfort, but to steady the moment. You did not ask, Judy replied. You did not think beyond yourself. That is the problem. That is the lesson. Alyssa nodded slowly, absorbing each word like a blow she had earned. Maria's gaze softened, reluctantly, painfully. I do not hate you, she said, though her voice trembled with the effort of saying it honestly. But what you did, it broke something in me, and in you too. The words landed with quiet force. Alyssa lowered her head. I know, she whispered. I feel it. Judy let the silence hold before speaking again. What happens next, she said, is not about punishing you, Miss Harwood. It is about accountability. About building someone you can actually live with once the power and the influence are no longer there. Alyssa lifted her eyes, red and swollen. I want that, she said. I do not want to be this anymore. Judy nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement, not approval. Then be prepared, she said, her voice steady and firm. Because accountability is coming, and it will change you. Alyssa sat rigidly, wiping the last streaks of mascara from her face. Her breathing steadied, but the fear did not leave. She understood that what came next was not avoidance, not protection, it was consequence. Judge Judy folded her hands, her expression a blend of gravity and quiet, measured restraint. She was not angry anymore. Anger would have been too simple for what had unfolded here. Instead, she wore the look of someone who had witnessed this pattern too many times. The collision of power, fear, and immaturity, and understood exactly what needed to follow. Miss Harwood, she began, her voice even. I am going to outline what accountability looks like in this situation. I want you to listen carefully. Alyssa nodded, her posture small, every trace of the polished confidence she had carried in with her now gone. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table like something to hold on to. Judy gestured toward the documents. You manipulated an academic process for your own benefit. You damaged the plaintiff's opportunities. You eroded her confidence and derailed her path in ways that will take considerable time to repair. The consequences must therefore reflect that reality, not your intentions. Alyssa closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. I understand, she murmured. Judy continued, her tone firm but without cruelty. First, you will provide a written acknowledgement submitted directly to the program you manipulated. You will detail your actions, your misuse of influence, and the harm it caused Miss Torres. Alyssa nodded, the humiliation of it visibly stinging. Second, Judy said, you will arrange, through a third-party mediator, to compensate Miss Torres for the professional setback she suffered. Financially, yes, but also by providing access to an equivalent or greater opportunity. And you will do so without involving your father, his staff, or his office in any capacity. Alyssa's head snapped up, eyes wide. But he is the one who... No, Judy cut in sharply. You are the one who acted. This responsibility belongs to you. Alyssa's shoulders sank, but she whispered, okay. Maria watched quietly, a complicated mixture of relief and lingering pain moving across her face. She did not celebrate, she did not smirk. She simply breathed, slowly, unsteadily, but more freely than before. Third, Judy said, lowering her tone, you will submit a formal request to withdraw any political or familial influence from future academic evaluations. You may still find success in life, but you will not find it through borrowed power. A long silence followed. Alyssa stared at her hands, absorbing each condition like the foundation of a life that finally needed to be lived with honesty. I will do it, she said softly. All of it. Judy studied her, searching for sincerity rather than performance. Good, she said finally. Because this is not about punishment. It is about learning what integrity looks like when no one is watching. Alyssa exhaled, unsteady but genuine. Maria shifted slightly, her voice emerging in a soft, almost tentative tone. I do not want her life destroyed, she said quietly. I only ever wanted the truth. Alyssa looked at her with a gratitude that seemed to surprise even herself. A look she was not sure she had earned. And you have it, Judy replied. Both of you do. Truth for Miss Torres, accountability for Miss Harwood. That is justice. The room absorbed her words like a settling breath. Judy lifted one final sheet, the same thin page that had first begun to crack Alyssa's mask. "There is one remaining matter," she said quietly, "and it is time we address it." She placed the page on the bench. The courtroom seemed to draw a single collective breath. Alyssa's eyes locked onto the document with the dread of someone staring directly at the source of their own undoing. The paper was unassuming. One sheet, one signature, one decision that had set everything in motion. She stared at it as though it carried her father's voice, his expectations, the accumulated weight of every lesson he had pressed into her since childhood. Her hands clasped together, knuckles white, bracing for a verdict she already knew was inevitable. Judge Judy rested her fingertips on the page. "This," she said quietly, "is the message in which you used your father's name as a weapon, not a resource." Alyssa looked down, tears gathering again. Not the frantic kind born of self-preservation, but the slow, heavy kind that come with genuine realization. Judy continued, her tone no longer sharp but deeply deliberate. "You wrote to Senator Harwood will not tolerate incompetence. He expects me placed immediately." Alyssa winced, her shoulders drawing inward as though the words struck her physically. "This sentence," Judy said, pressing a finger lightly to the page, "tells me more about your life than anything you said on that stand today." The gallery fell silent. Even Maria sat straighter, uncertain where this was going. Judy leaned forward, her voice steady and controlled, but softened at the edges in a way that quietly shifted the atmosphere of the room. "Your father taught you power, influence, image, winning," she paused. "But he did not teach you responsibility, or humility, or how to exist without his shadow as your shelter." Alyssa's breath shuddered. "I know," she whispered. "I know he did not." "And so," Judy said, "you learned to lead with intimidation rather than integrity, with entitlement rather than effort, with fear rather than genuine confidence." Tears fell freely down Alyssa's cheeks now, silent, exposed, unguarded. "But today," Judy said, "you learned something he could never have taught you." Alyssa lifted her eyes, searching. "You learned that accountability," Judy said, "is not the enemy of strength. It is strength." Alyssa's lips parted, a soundless breath escaping. The breath of something shifting inside her for the first time. Maria watched, her own eyes softening, not in forgiveness, but in witnessing a transformation she had never anticipated. The composed, polished daughter of a powerful man now looked like a young woman finally stripped down to who she actually was. Judy set the document aside. "This paper represents your old life," she said. "One built on someone else's power, someone else's rules, someone else's voice." She gestured gently toward Alyssa. "But the consequences I have given you today, those belong to you, and so does the opportunity to begin again." Alyssa nodded, wiping her tears slowly, as though absorbing every word like a truth she had spent her whole life waiting to hear without ever knowing it. "I want to do better," she said, her voice breaking. "I want to be better." Judy studied her, not the girl she had been, but the woman she might yet become. "And you can," Judy said quietly, "but only if you stop living as a reflection of your father and start living as yourself." Alyssa covered her mouth, overwhelmed. The courtroom was completely still. Judy raised her gavel. "One final step remains," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "And it will determine whether today becomes your turning point, or simply another moment you walk away from." The gavel hovered in the air, poised above consequence, above closure. Alyssa held her breath. Maria's eyes stayed calm. The entire room waited for the sound that would mark both an ending and a beginning. Judge Judy lowered the gavel with a measured exhale, but did not strike it yet. She let the gravity of the moment settle first, the quiet before the echo. Alyssa sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the judge with a mixture of dread and fragile hope. Maria's hands rested calmly on top of her folder now, the trembling finally gone. Judy began slowly, her voice shifting into the cadence she reserved for final decisions, the kind that rearranged the air in a room. "This courtroom," she said, "is not here to destroy lives. It is here to restore balance." Alyssa's shoulders rose, then fell, barely, but enough to show she was listening with every part of herself. "I have considered the evidence, the harm caused, the truth revealed, and the remorse expressed," Judy continued. "Miss Harwood, you attempted to sabotage another young woman's future. You used your father's influence as currency. You deceived, deflected, and believed yourself beyond reach." Alyssa's eyes dropped, her cheeks wet again, but this time she did not hide. "However," Judy said, her voice gentling, "you also faced your truth today, not flawlessly, not gracefully, but sincerely." A quiet murmur moved through the gallery. Maria's eyes softened in recognition of that truth. "And Miss Torres," Judy said, turning slightly, "your strength today was not in your evidence, though it was considerable, but in your composure, your honesty, and your refusal to let bitterness define you. This court acknowledges the harm you endured, the doors that were closed without cause, and the confidence that was shaken." Maria nodded, emotion tightening her expression. "Therefore," Judy continued, The court orders the following. Miss Harwood will provide a written acknowledgement of wrongdoing to the internship program. She will compensate Miss Torres for the lost opportunity and secure an equivalent or superior placement through legitimate means. She will withdraw all political and familial influence from her academic life going forward. Alyssa nodded with each condition, accepting without resistance. Then Judy lowered her tone, speaking directly, almost intimately. Not to punish, but to seal something lasting. Miss Harwood, she said, this is not your end, it is your beginning. But beginnings demand honesty, humility, and the courage to rebuild without leaning on borrowed power. Alyssa wiped her cheeks, her voice unsteady as she answered, I want that, I will. Judy nodded once. Then she turned to Maria. Miss Torres, may this verdict restore what was taken from you. Not the months that were lost, but the confidence that was always rightfully yours. Maria exhaled, her eyes glistening with a relief that ran deeper than victory. Thank you, she whispered. Finally. Judy raised the gavel and brought it down with a sharp, decisive crack that rang through the courtroom like the world recalibrating itself. Alyssa flinched at the sound, but when she raised her head, something new had settled in her eyes. Clarity. Maria closed her eyes briefly, letting the finality move through her. The camera pulled back, capturing both young women, one beginning to rise, the other learning at last how not to fall, and the judge who had guided them to that place. Justice is not always loud. Sometimes it arrives in the quiet collapse of arrogance and the steady, unhurried rise